So this is a beautiful photo. It's actually about, 15 years old, Tom? That's Tom and I in the blue kayak over there, and our friends Sullivan and Jules, who are now towering young men at 24 and 22. So I want to talk about the Murrumbidgee. Okay, so at the risk of showing this photo once again, there'll be a few there, I'm actually showing it for a different reason. So this photo has catalysed action because it is so dire. And what most people say is, how could this ever have happened? This is a really human response. How could this have ever happened? And then what we tend to do is we want to blame someone, something. It's someone else's problem. This has happened, as Bradley said, as Joel said, as all the graphs show, because of enormous number of different factors. Some of them environmental, some of them policy decisions. We were building the Snowy Hydro to enable electricity generation for irrigation as well, so our nation could prosper. And so this didn't happen as a result of any one person. This just happened because it's an accumulation of errors that we've actually made along the way. And it's also happened because we did forget about this river. There's been incredible strides made in the wider Murray-Darling Basin. Unfortunately, this 300-kilometre stretch just got left behind because it was probably a bit hard because it is so complex and it has so many different competing needs, and also we have so many different jurisdictions. So it's no one's fault, and that's really where our campaign started. We didn't go out saying, you're to blame. It was more about saying, we need to solve this together. And that's made this campaign very different from anything else. And we just recently had the Canadians out from the Water Trust funded the Canadians to come out and have a look at us and meet a lot of our stakeholders. And they said to me at the end, they said, this is an incredible community. You all know each other. I said, well, yeah, we do. And you sort of seem to just, say, well, I can't do that bit, can you do this bit? And even though we might not share all the same beliefs, we all have one underlying core reason to get together in this room, and that's because we actually care about the river. So when we care about something, we come together, and this is not dependent on money. This is because people always find time when it's something that matters. And so this is all really about our emotions and what makes us do what we do. No one in this room is doing this for the money, because there hasn't been money for a very long time for the Upper Murrumbidgee. And we have finally got some, but that's only really a small part of the puzzle in terms of how we're going to look after this river going into the future. So I spent quite a long time on this talk. I thought it would be really easy, but I was still working on it at 12:30 last night. And I woke up this morning and thought, no, that's not quite right. So I hope you enjoyed. It's musings, really, over the last couple of years. So we will find time when we care about something. And clearly, one of the big things we're talking here is about flow. But I wanted to use this picture because when it comes to the Upper Murrumbidgee, it wasn't water that we've been pooling over the last couple of years. It's actually been our knowledge. And knowledge is derived when we bring together practical experience, wisdom. It's the knowledge of how we feel when we're on the river, what we see when we're out in the river. It's through art, it's through culture, and it's through connection. So we've been talking to lots of different people about their knowledge and sharing that knowledge. So it hasn't been pooling water, it's been pooling knowledge. And that's had an incredible ripple effect. James is now part of our tribe, and it's been so nice having him coming to all the meetings that we've been coming to. So we've been seeing the same faces coming back. We've got Paul and Luke, they were here 2 years ago. Paul didn't mention that his claim to fame is that he lives in the pizza-shaped house, the Pizza Hut house, just as you go over the river after Breadbow. You'll now know where he lives. Sorry, Paul. But it's so wonderful to have this group of people together and new people coming to learn more about what we're doing. So here's the Forgotten River. You've seen this photo before as well. And I know Kim and Helen are here who live in the Bumbalong Valley, and it's not looking like that anymore. We've done a lot of work. What I wanted to say about this campaign was that it wasn't one organisation, it was a very deliberate campaign, and it didn't rely on science. So not science as we tend to think about it, which is the physical science. So all the graphs and all the stats saying how terrible everything is, that did not change anything for the Upper Bidgie. We've known that for the last 20, 30 years, and it hasn't actually changed anything. What changed was looking at the wider political environment. It was talking to people who actually had power. So we were talking to Tanya Plibersek, Katie Gallagher, we talked to Shane Rattenbury, who was then Minister for Water, and of course David Pocock. So David had influence, and we knew that that influence was only going to last for a very short time. He had to be swayed by Tanya Plibersek to support the Restoring the Rivers Bill, and the only way that got across was by her agreeing to the package of measures for the Upper Murrumbidgee. That's how it happened. And David goes to the Murrumbidgee every Friday morning and does insane things with rocks and various things, throwing things around as part of a, I don't know, I think it's a fitness campaign. But anyway, he's an awesome guy. He's actually a really great guy. He is very intelligent. And we actually sat with him and Sam, his advisor, and wrote the letter from David to Tanya Plibersek to say, this is what we need. And that was all based on the work that Max talked about earlier, her group saying this is what we need. So what I want you to really get here is that we all have our own networks of influence. And for us, we chose who it was that needed to go and talk to the person. It wasn't always the same person. Max did the Snowy Board. Andy would have gone somewhere else. Antia was talking to landholders. It was about where our trusted networks were, because that's actually what enables change to happen. And here we have Brad and his sister, and also Richie, who were also there with us. They're traditional custodians of this area. And it is a problem for us at the moment because we need to be building more bridges with our First Nations, but they need to build bridges between themselves first in this region, because that's a bit of a problem. We're not quite sure where to start there. But I will give you a bit of a clue at the end. So that was amazing. And as Andy said, in 2 days' time, it'll be a year since this happened. So I actually want to get a bit philosophical now, because for the last year, although that money is sitting there, it hasn't gone out, because we've had to go through a process of working out how it's going to be delivered. So the River Restoration Centre and a whole lot of other community groups have really been waiting to see what's happening and trying to keep the lights on in the process. But we have been watching and we have been engaged. But getting philosophical, I want us to think about the idea of mutualism. So I read a magazine called The New Philosopher. Some of you may have seen it in the stands. It's really good. It just gives you a quick sort of insight into the latest thinking about social science or why we're here, those sorts of things. I only buy it once a year because any more than that's a bit much. It's a lot of introspection. But it was talking a lot about this idea of mutualism. So when we think of mutualism, we often think of the bee and the flower. So they are coexisting and both parties benefit from this relationship. This is also mutualism, and it's pretty gross, but the fish is benefiting and the feet are benefiting. Has anyone ever done this? What was it like? Horrible. Yeah, I think it looks horrible too. Anyway, it's not something that's on my bucket list, so knock yourself out if it is. Okay, so rivers do enrich our lives in multiple ways, but I think we can honestly say, thank you Trixie, that when we see the river like this isn't mutualism that we're looking at here. And I think what's happened for the Upper Murrumbidgee is that it's been much more like parasitism, which is uncomfortable for us all, but that's really what it's been like. We have taken and taken and taken and taken, and we haven't really been able to give a lot back. And we want to change that. So if we go on to the next slide, we can see Adventure Volunteers, and this is a common site out on the Upper Murrumbidgee. All of us in this room have probably been involved in restoration activities on that stretch of river. We are a really tight unit, and Antia is our leader. When it comes to knowing everybody on the river, Antia is the person you go to. And if you say, like kudos to me, because if living in Ainslie, of course, the tofu curtain, if I go out up into the Bidgie and I say I'm a friend of Antia's, I'm okay. So I can be talked to. So this is the Adventure Volunteers, and these people go out, they hop into their kayaks and they go and stem inject willows. My husband's one of them. He really enjoys killing willows now. Leon, friend for life there. And they go and do all this amazing work, which is brilliant. But we have seen today that we do need a lot more of it. So when we look at the Upper Murrumbidgee, this photo's been used too. I think Bradley used this one. I really like this one because you've got the power in the background and you've also got the river. We're not suggesting that we're not going to be producing power anymore, but what we do want is an environment where everybody flourishes, including the Upper Murrumbidgee. So that's really what we're talking about today, is that we want to move from that more parasitism model to a mutualism model, where the river is benefiting and we're benefiting as well. So we have an incredible opportunity. Like, this opportunity is unprecedented. Oh, God. That's okay. No, it's all right. It's all right. Yep. It's unprecedented, and I don't think it's ever going to happen again. So we don't know how much power David's going to have in the next political cycle. Right now he has power, but that could well change. We could have a lot more independence in, or we could have a complete change of government and Australia becomes really, really conservative. We go back to the Libs. We don't know. But we have this moment in time and we have an opportunity that we really need to use. So how are we going to go forward and do that? Well, we've got money. And lots of people get excited about money, but money can in some ways slow things down. So the last year has been really slow for us, but it's been incredibly hard for our government colleagues in New South Wales and the ACT, Victoria's just getting on board, and the Commonwealth, because this gift that we have been given is attached to a whole range of accountability requirements that require a lot of thinking about how we're going to do this. And the reason we have to do so much thinking about it is that although we've got resources, this concept of fairness is really what gets people uptight. What's going to be the fair distribution of that water? What's going to be the fair distribution of that money? I've been working in the Bidgie for a really long time. Why don't I get money just because I'm a good person and I run this thing called the River Restoration Centre? So each of us will have a concept of what's fair. And fairness is about what we believe is just, and it's a belief. So we have to really be clear about what people's ideas of fairness are, because if we don't know that, it's very difficult for us to walk together. So with fairness and a sense of justice in play, as a government organisation, you're going to really try to avoid the roller coaster of uncertainty. Now, the problem with modern day life, as Bradley has also said, is that we are in a really uncertain environment. And I was just thinking about, James was talking about the redfin not getting into Tantanga, or if they did, they'd be kept there by a fish screen. If we were to have a cataclysmic event, maybe they could tip over the top of the wall. I don't know. We have to actually think about those things. So we have this roller coaster of uncertainty. Now, what do humans do in the face of uncertainty? What would you do if everything was uncertain? Panic. That's one option. Nothing. That's another option. It's still a choice. There is something that governments try to do. Kathleen. Exactly. So they want to try and get some control. So this control is not because they're being pedantic. It's because they know they have to answer to ministers, and ministers have to answer to their electorate. And so they will try and control as much as possible how that money in this case is going to be spent, who's going to be involved, and how it's going to roll out. So that means then if you're not in that area, then you have to step to a side and just let that happen, which is what we've been doing over the last year. This has to be done through a federal funding agreement. It's finally been signed, which is fantastic. But there's been a whole lot of this, and for people who haven't been in our tribe, there's also been a whole lot of this, which is how can we narrow this down? How can we focus it? Can we spend this just on threatened species? Can we spend it somewhere else? No, you can't. It has to be on the Upper Murrumbidgee. So there's been this to and fro to try and keep the thinking broad, in the sense that this is for the whole Upper Murrumbidgee, the 300 kilometres of the Upper Murrumbidgee, but not just on one thing. We have to somehow tick off on a whole range of those threats that Antia talked about earlier. So narrow thinking is really common, and wanting to perfect everything is also another really common thing. And that's all about control and feeling confident that when you go to work and the minister asks you a question, you can actually respond truthfully that yes, you have jumped through all the loops, you have thought about all these things. And it takes time, and it's time that's really frustrating for those of us outside, but it actually has to happen. So we've kind of accepted that that's had to happen. And we know that people like Ryan and Steph and Max, all people who are involved in government, Leon, so many people have been working so hard. So this has actually been a quick process. The year has actually been a quick process. So we also want to avoid what's perceived as risky. And one of the great things about the Upper Murrumbidgee is because we haven't had very many resources, we haven't really had any, we've had nothing to lose. So we've really talked to everybody and we've asked everybody for help, and it's never really felt like an us against them situation. So that's why we know each other. That's why Antia will say, oh, there's a Crown Lands grant, or Luke will say, oh, I'm ready to do the next bid, or Paul will say, yeah, I'll get involved in that. Because there hasn't been a lot to go around. So we've been working really hard to get what we do have out there so that it really matters for the river. So sometimes it can feel like this. I haven't felt like this. Have you felt like this, James? Have you felt like that little bird at all? No? Nah, he hasn't, which is really good. So when we get a lot of controlling processes in, it can maximise the chance of this happen because you feel like you're going to get munched up by the wheels of government or whatever it might be. In actual fact, don't be deceived, because this is mutualism. So there is no chance that that crocodile is going to eat those birds, because those birds are cleaning its teeth. So that is actually a slide about mutualism. So we can all work together. So what do I think that we need going forward? Well, we all hold the key, and now that the government process stuff has been sorted, I think it's time that we revisit how this whole campaign started, because there's one key ingredient that we really need to be investing in. So when we look at the different capital that we can draw upon in the work that we do, we have produced capital, we have human capital, social capital, and natural capital. There's lots of other models, but I like this one because it makes it up pretty clearly. So what's composed in those areas? You can see the definitions there, but that's each of us. I often put our experts in there, because experts often work on their own or are seen as speaking about their area of expertise as just them, when there is a whole team there as well, and they always acknowledge that, but we say, oh, well, the science said that. So each of us is in that area. That's our area of expertise. That's what we bring to the table. Produced capital is what we've been talking about, our power, our development, our agriculture. Oh, God, that's annoying. Next. Then we have our natural capital, which is the Upper Bidgee. But my point is that it's at the social capital level where we really need to be investing our time, because that's been the difference for the Upper Murrumbidgee. It's been everyone in this room harnessing their networks, harnessing their passion for the river, talking to people that actually got it over the line. We've had all that science, all that time. It has not changed a thing for the Upper Bidgee, or there's been tweaks. But for it to really kick over into doing something major, it was about using the social networks to get to the people who could make the decisions. So I believe that going forward, we actually need to do more investing in social capital, which is why these forums are so incredibly important. The other thing is we have to be really intentional, because often we never put any money into social capital and it requires time and effort. So when I put a grant in, I can ask for money for a fence, I can ask money for pest control. I can't ask for money to go and have a chat to a person or spend a day out on the road. That's not funded currently by government. I'm sure that'll change over time. But at the moment, you sort of embed that in your project delivery. Well, at least we do, sorry. That's the secret's out. So we need to be intentional about this, and as I said, now that we have got those federation funding agreements signed, that's all squared away. We've now got to deliver in a really short space of time on-ground works, communication, engagement. We've got to get the hydrological models happening, Joel. There's so much for us to do, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I can now feel quite excited because we're actually now going to get to do the stuff that we've been wanting to do for so many years. Now, that's awful. We don't want that to happen again. I don't think it will. Because the thing about social capital is it compounds the more you spend it. So the more conversations we have, the more that social capital grows. The fact that so many of us are in this room and we're here 2 years ago and then we're in a meeting before where, oh great, I'm going to see Antia, I'm going to see Simon, I'm going to see James or whoever it might be, because we've got social capital together. We trust each other. We want to make that work. So social capital compounds. And it's these sort of words like trust and helpfulness and kindness that underpin social capital. There's no mention of money there. Resources are really important, but to be honest, Andy and I'd be doing this even if we weren't getting paid, and today we're not, just FYI. But we do it because we really, really care and because we want to still be part of this group. So something like money is not going to actually stop us from being here. And I know that many of you feel the same. So in closing then, I want to just be clear that I do not live in a house full of unicorns and rainbows. I am a realist, I get frustrated, I get cross, I will blame people. But I still come back every time to people. And again, this is in the Bredbow Gorge. This is a group of people from the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. It's our mentoring program. And they are being mentored by people from the Commonwealth Environmental Water Office, New South Wales DPI, ACT Government, and independent consultancies. And the reason we run these types of programs is that this is social capital. These are our water leaders. Everyone in this room is a leader, and we need to be investing in each other. And they had just managed to paddle to the sandbank. So, when we think of mutualism, oh, God. Okay, give up. Let me just try and get right to the end. So in rounding it all up, I wanted to come back to what I started talking about at the beginning, which was this idea of mutualism. So social capital is what builds mutualism, and our rivers embody the essence of mutualism because they provide so much for so many different values, whether it's ecological, environmental, cultural, social. So it's about our bonds and our shared responsibility. And so in finishing, the only way forward is together. So thank you very much.